Hey guys and gals, welcome to the very first MINjas YouTube tutorial. Today, I'm going to be showing you how you can create the Frosty girl effect with Photoshop. Now a little bit of disclaimer. So this is our very first video and I am by far not an expert in Photoshop. So if any suggestions you guys have or upcoming videos that you'd like to see, please let us know. To get started, we have the stock image that is linked in the description, and I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate it using Command J. And then name my layer base, and so this is the layer we're going to work off of. And immediately I know I want to do the before and after effect, so I'm going to make a before folder or a group, and you can do Command G for that, or you can just click on the little folder icon at the bottom there. And so one of the first things I do with any image that I work with is I like to clean it up. With this, there's no exception, so I'm going to bust out the healing brush tool and get started. Now, it's not important that you hit every spot that I hit. It's just that, you know, that we clean it up and make it look nice. So I've also noticed that under her eyes, I could use some work. So I'm going to do a clone tool and make it kind of broad. Now what I should do is I should lower the opacity a bit more. You see that it darkens that spot there. And I'm going to go back and correct that later. Again, you can see where I'm making my mistake here. I've sort of bruised her face because that skin was darker. So to correct this, you can either reduplicate and change the opacity, or you can use the dodge tool and correct it. So there you go. Now she's a little better looking. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to smooth out her skin using Gaussian blur and layer mask. So I've duplicated a layer again, and again you can use Command J to do that. I'm not too concerned with how well I outline her here. I'm just going to apply a generous feathering to it. So what I did here is I inverted the selection and I used the paint bucket tool to paint the background of it black, and this allows the base layer to shine through and on blur, so to speak, the image I'm working with currently, leaving only her face blurred out. And so now we're also going to use the paintbrush tool to black out the eyes and any other features that we want. You can also change the opacity of the blurred layer that you have here to make that smooth skin a little bit more believable looking. And so what I've done now is I've made a new layer and I've called it eye whiten. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a paintbrush, just a white paintbrush over the eye, and then I believe I'm going to use soft light on it and change the opacity. But first, before I want to do that, I want to take care of some of the brighter red blood vessels in her eyes. So I'm going to use the clone tool, take parts of her eye and cover up those spots. And so now I'm going to apply the white effect onto the eyes, and you can just go right over the iris. We're gonna erase that here in a second. And you can see she looks quite creepy now. So right, the iris is pretty washed out, so we just want to erase that. I'm also going to apply a Gaussian blur on it to help disperse some of that white. And just erase along the sides there, make sure there's no Gaussian blur sticking out. And now I'm going to erase in the middle of the iris. So I applied a 14 opacity to my eraser, and I'm erasing along some of the darker spots of the eye. So I'm going to make a new layer, and this one's going to be called Iris, and we're going to apply this nice sort of baby blue to it. And once again, you can go over that pupil there. We can just erase it out. So I thought soft light was a little too bright, so I'm applying a multiply. One tip is that people tend to forget their lighting, and if you color over the light, obviously it's going to change the color of that light. So you're going to want to go back and make sure it remains white. It's going to make all the difference in the world. So great, now she's pretty much prettied up. You can do several different things here. You can continue on to pretty her up. You always have the option of coloring in her lips. You can add some blush. I see there's an error on the left of her cheek there. It's kind of too bright. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate the base layer, and I'm going to desaturate it. And you'll get these weird little blue spots that we've erased. So I'm going to apply a soft light and take the opacity down. Now I'm duplicating the desaturated layer again, and this time I'm going to apply a gradient map on it. Once again, we're going with soft light, and I'm going to change the opacity down. And now for the fun part, we're going to add the paint marks. So I'm just going to pick a brush here, and it's no special brush. If you have CS5 and up, you should have this brush. And so I'm going to draw it in the shape of what I want. Now for this, I'm using white. I'd go ahead and recommend that unless you want a darker color, in which case you can use black or a sort of gray. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. So while on the paint marks, take the magic wand tool and try to highlight all of the paint marks, just the outline, so you can select off of the actual paint marks and then just do an invert. And then go down to your base and Command J. This is going to do a quick copy and paste into a new layer. And essentially what you just did was you've taken the shape of the paint mark and you've captured the skin that was around that. So I've named that layer that we pulled from the base the skin detail layer. So I'm going to change the skin detail layer to soft light, and I'm going to change the paint marks layer to color. And then I'm going to go to the hue and saturation, and make sure you click the colorize option, and then I'm going to change the color of my skin detail. And then I'm going to duplicate that skin detail layer. You can change the color if you'd like. I suggest you keep the same and then do a multiply. And as with all these layers, you're going to want to play with the opacity. So play down so you can get some more of the skin detail to come through. Now on the paint marks layer, I'm going to add a really slight drop shadow to it. And also I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. And you're going to make sure you want to keep that the angle lighting appropriate to where their face is, and it just happens to be 120 in this case. So I'm pretty pleased with what I have so far. I'm going to add an inner gradient, which is probably not the best name for it. What essentially I'm going to do is I'm going to take selective parts of the background and apply a gradient only to that, and that's just to darken the background. Now, if the image didn't have this big furry hat on it, I would probably just use the pen tool or the marquee tool, but in this case it's kind of a pain, so I'm doing the lazy way. And so I'm going to apply pretty generous feathering to this to make sure I get all the parts. And so I'm going to do foreground to transparent gradient, and I've also chosen the spherical gradient, and I've reversed it. Now you'll see those little errors there, but I'm going to apply another gradient, so those errors won't show up. So using the same settings, I'm just going to make a new layer called gradient, and then instead of using the magic wand, I'm just going to throw it over. And then you can change the opacity as you see fit. Now I'm going to add a blue layer to it. And this is essentially just a solid blue mark that's been changed to soft light. You see, I couldn't quite decide which blue I wanted for it. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm pretty much just going back and tweaking colors. So I believe here I'm going to use the curves tool and play around with some of the shading and some of the contrast. And so we're nearing the end of our little project here. And so I'm adding some cinematic black bars to the top and bottom of the image. And I instantly love the effect that it creates. It makes the scene probably 200% more dramatic. So again, I'm just going back and I'm playing with different settings, seeing what I like most. So now I'm going to apply non-sharpen mask to make it, of course, sharpen more. You can see the progress we've made so far. And now we're gonna do the before and after effect to the image. And how to do this is actually pretty easy. So we have the original image from before. You can go ahead and unlock that and move it to the top, but move it just under your bars layer so that it's still within there. And then you want to add a layer mask to it. And with that layer mask, as you know, you can apply a gradient to it. So using the same gradient we've been doing, other than changing it from radial to linear, you can mark across the face or really any point and cut the image in half. And then whatever's beneath that, invisible, will show through. And then, of course, the other half will be whatever the top layer is. Okay, so I'm going to put the finishing touches on it. Just add the before and after text. And so now you have your final image. There's a lot of room for improvement. As I said before, I am certainly not the best at Photoshop, but I'm trying to be. And I hope this video has been helpful to you. I've certainly enjoyed making it. If you have any suggestions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you for watching.